His visit to China. Another sort of news, however, has emerged from the presidential quarter. We turn to Melissa Gardner at KZAB in Santa Fe with this breaking news. Melissa?
Thanks, Richard. Today, a local Firefly girl accused the president of sexual misconduct. This photo of the president with the girls was taken during their recent tour of the White House. The girl claims that the sexual misconduct occurred inside the Oval Office. Her attorney says there are no plans yet to hold a press conference. Right now, folks in Santa Fe and the rest of America are waiting for a response from the White House on these harsh allegations.
I mean, first of all, I don't think it has anything to do with, Clinton, and that we weren't chasing any specific thing about, the Clinton administration. In fact, that's why I never really show a president, period, because you don't want to put a face to a president. It's really the presidency as opposed to a specific president. And I do think it is more the media in terms of how much manipulation is taking place on a day-to-day basis, and to the point that we no longer are quite sure where reality is and those things which are fabricated. And it gets to be, I think, more sinister as time goes along, because you'll be able to do even more things, as we allude to in the movie, by digitally putting someone in another environment, so that if seeing is no longer believing, then where are we? And then we're really left to our own sense of morality, and how far does that play out?
We thought a year ago, when we finished Wag the Dog, that we had made a real good political satire. Today, it doesn't feel like satire. The events that have happened in this country, certainly in the past 4 months, are far more outrageous than anything we could come up with. As a matter of fact, if we had come up with some of these events, if we'd come up with a Linda Tripp and a Lucianne Goldberg, people would have said, write this out, this is too ridiculous, please. I mean, so there's no more satire. And as a matter of fact, today I was having a conversation with somebody, and we were talking about Network, and I don't know when's the last time you watched Network, but Network has come true. By the time you see Faye Dunaway sitting down with this black activist talking about how she should do a talk show program with some white conservative, come on, this is CNBC every night of the week. Network has completely come true. Howard Beale screaming to everybody, saying, I can't take this anymore, and talking about how, what have you become? It's carnivals and jokesters and whatever else. And he goes on and says, this is what television's become. Jerry Springer, give me a break.
How much is that affecting us and confusing us is, I guess, issues that we'll just sort of debate. But it's a hard thing when once upon a time things were real and some things weren't real, and now we begin to blur those lines, between fact and fiction. Once the lines between fact and fiction blur, then we begin to become much more skeptical and much more cynical. And I think that's why sometimes certain information is presented and people don't know what to believe. And I think that's where we are right now.
I do think that film is like a face in the crowd, and Wag the Dog really do a public service, because it's when I was talking about our kids being raised more cynically now, and seeing through a lot of the stuff that people used to just swallow whole. I think that films like that are a learning process. Just as Face in the Crowd was a warning, Wag the Dog gives us some insight as to how you could actually maybe start a war, which is incidentally not quite as far-fetched as it seems. All the way back to the Spanish-American War, a lot of people think that William Randolph Hearst, with his beating the drum for war and building up the atrocities and all this and anti-Spain and Remember the Maine, all the rest of it, had a great deal to do with making that war. So it's happened through journalism. It's happened through radio. It's easier than ever to sell on television, which is so far the greatest means for selling commodities, whether it's beer or presidential candidates, almost interchangeably to what they hope of the gullible consumers.
The political film has never been a popular genre, and it's always been very difficult to get a political film made. I mean, I don't even really consider The Manchurian Candidate a political film. I consider it a thriller. I really do. It's a melodrama, as is 7 Days in May, that has political overtones to it, yes. But certainly in the case of Manchurian Candidate, every studio in town had turned that picture down until we got Frank Sinatra. And Frank Sinatra was the biggest star of his time. So when he said he wanted to do it, it was very simple to get the financing from United Artists. But even after they saw the picture, they didn't believe in it. It wasn't until people had to tell them that it's really good that they finally got it. By that time, it was already out. 7 Days in May was a tough picture to get made. But because of the cast we had, Paramount did it. It's, as I say, I mean, I'm repeating myself, but it's never been easy.
I've always been fascinated by documentaries. I've always loved, documentary work. And The War Room, I think, is a good example of looking at the political process. You know, not the agenda of what the man stands for as much as what do you need to do to get the man, to the place that you want him to be in.
Well, everybody's looking for a story to feed to the press that will, really hold the interest of, the viewers out there, because, they're all selling, cheese anyway, no matter what. And that's a little bit of the problem, with television and news, I know, but they work it on both sides. When we did The War Room, the campaign is in just as much of a battle to kind of sell their candidate. And I remember one instance in particular that we have in our film when all of a sudden someone came in with a videotape that showed that there were Bush campaign materials, posters and bumper stickers and all this kind of stuff being made in Brazil.
Put the tape in the thing. And this is wonderful in the South. Look, if you listen to the tape, watch this.
George Bush, as últimas pesquisas provocaram pelo menos grande susto. Com os democratas na frente, a já milionária e multicolorida campanha eleitoral americana vai ser ainda mais agitada. A ordem do Partido Republicano tem...
Yeah, why did we go to Brazil? I wanted to pay for it.
It's James
Brazilgate. Riogate. Oh, man.
Hey, Kaya. Get me Susan Zerensky's number, please. With CBS? Susan Zerensky, please. James Carville. Huh? She's a woman that broadcast news. Hey, I got something I'd be interested in. How would you like a videotape of a newscast on Brazilian television that has, that we believe the script goes something like this, with appropriate visuals of printing presses? The Republican campaign is what what it is that Bush is buying up to $10 million in printing in Brazil. And the Brazilian TV ran it. It's this huge printing presses with Bush Quayle material coming on. I mean, it's perfect for television.
You know, I am so goddamn tired of this goddamn double standards where the press lets these sons of bitches get away with murder in every little thing that we do. Clinton's numbers don't add up. Clinton's numbers don't add up.
So fucking true.
You know,
Unbelievable.
if we say 50 plus 50 is 104, and they say 50 plus 50 is 104,000, they'll say, well, both of them are stretching the numbers a little bit. Hello? Yeah.
All the goddamn stories. They're not going with the story. They're printing the shit, you know. I think that they've given up on it now, Governor. Bush people said they got the guy wired and said, well, I just did it. It was an offshore operation, you know. So they're trying to nail him. So it's not dead, but it's just not going tonight.
I think that for me, the War Room, the one thing that it had in relation to Wag the Dog was really this round-the-clock feeling of working round the clock and, you know, non-stop, and you're going to work till you get the job done. And that feeling that nobody, you know, nobody ever really slept, nobody seemed to change their clothes. They like ate on the run. They just, you know, they went and went and went until the job was done, until the president was elected, until his ratings, you know, went up, you know, until we won a war.
The war's not over. No, the war isn't over. I saw it on TV. No, that's what they hired me for. No, the war isn't over till I say it's over, okay? This is my picture. This is not the CIA's picture. You think you're in a tight spot now.
I remember at the very end, the last day, when we were shooting the War Room, Ted Koppel appeared. And, you know, this was kind of our private little world, and everybody else was following Clinton, but we were there in the War Room, and then all of a sudden they were there too. And, you know, it was very scary because, you know, that was going to be the end of our story, watching James and George. But at the same time, it didn't matter because they didn't focus on what we focused on. They didn't really care about what James and George were like, or what they cared, or who were these people that were electing the president. What they really cared about was having Ted Koppel on camera very majestically asking questions to people. And, you know, that's a lot of what it's about. It's about their personas, their host personas.
I think the television, they have this dance worked out, and it works for both of them. It sells papers, and it sells, you know, people running for office. And neither of them want to end the dance. It's too rewarding. And it's like they've got this golden goose and they're just dancing their feet off.
It's a pity. I mean, I was Edward R. Murrow's assistant director, and I can just imagine what his reaction would be to the 6 o'clock news now. I mean, he would really, really be in an uproar over it. And, I mean, any semblance of purity, of high intentions, it has vanished, hasn't it? I mean, it's just it's all the Inquirer. I mean, it's really pretty shocking.
Yeah, I sometimes feel like I'm living in the world of network, but I'm here hanging onto the desk, maintaining standards. And what I always say to people, you know, you have to learn to separate us out from all that's going on around us. But that should be true in every field. Look, there's a lot of trash published, committed to the printed page. Doesn't mean that the best work then is judged by those standards. And it's true in films. There's a lot of junk made, but the great films stand out, and we don't say, well, film has gone to hell in America. We ought to be able to do that. Just because we all come out of the same tube doesn't mean that we're all alike. Well, I think politics and the entertainment industry are similar. It's a lot about power. It is, pardon me, a lot about vanity. It is, as well, a lot about manipulation, about mass audiences and getting them to see your point of view. And it's a lot about being a star. It's a lot about who can light up a room. I've been at the White House at state dinners, the President of the United States and the presidents of other countries. with Fred Astaire, with a lot of well-known Hollywood people. And it's just astonishing to me to see them all kind of taking the measure of each other. Who's the bigger star here? It's human nature.
Washington talks about Hollywood in completely derogatory terms, right? I mean, Hollywood is something to be avoided, except when the White House Correspondents' Dinner happens and you want to invite some high-profile guests. So who are the big splashy guests every year? Warren Beatty, Ellen DeGeneres and Anne Heche, you know, George Clooney. It's hilarious. So Washington hates Hollywood until it doesn't hate Hollywood. And I think that the attraction works both ways. I think most people in Hollywood, politics has no effect on their life except they're attracted to power, you know, and Hollywood, you know, money is the coin of the realm here, but that doesn't always buy you legitimacy, and somehow a lot of people in Hollywood, I think, look to Washington for a sense of legitimacy that lasts beyond the box office at your last picture. So there's a mutual attraction, and it goes back a long way.
But at the same time, I think there's a danger here that the rest of the country feels left out somehow. It's a kind of conceit in the journalistic, political, and Hollywood community that all that we do, the rest of the world cares about, and we end up talking primarily to each other. And I think that's a danger.
Well, I think television's impact on our society has been leveling it to mediocrity, and I mean, through television, we have a generation that's coming into its own now that's almost illiterate.
And that's why I think, you know, cartoonism is really upon us. I mean, I think, I don't mean that you have to just see a cartoon. A lot of movies really are cartoons. You know, they present situations, but they're really cartoon versions of it. And a lot of films that deal with certain kind of issues are sort of really like just basic cartoon, you know, sitcom related in some way, and not, and sort of like, you know, twice removed from reality, as if reality itself is a little too frightening. So you want it to be a little removed, a little kind of fake in a way. So it'll be a little bit more palatable and a little more acceptable.
I said to Elia that because of the impact of television, I really thought that Eisenhower might be the last bald president that we would ever have. I didn't think that we could have a president who didn't have hair, who wasn't a television personality.
I think that there is a lot of comment about the line between news and entertainment dissolving. But the fact of the matter is it was always a blurred line. You go back to the early days of newspaper in this century, in this country, Hearst was one of the great showmen of our time. He sold newspapers with a composition of the front page. The problem is that people always want to use just the good gray lady of the New York Times as their standard, when in fact journalism is a much broader spectrum than that. Then you move along. Radio in the earliest days had H.V. and Kaltenborn, who had a very dramatic, kind of almost Shakespearean reading style. Lowell Thomas was one of the most popular broadcasters of all time. He was a great showman, so the line was blurred then. The most successful early television evening news program was Huntley and Brinkley. People didn't watch just for the content. They loved the casting. These two people played off each other with a kind of showbiz chemistry, and David made his mark with his wry observations and his twinkly style. So it's always been the case. Edward R. Murrow, one of the founding fathers of television news, appeared on camera in Savile Row suits with a cigarette dramatically lit and off to the side, enveloped in a cloud of smoke, using language I couldn't use on the air now because I would be accused of being self-important and above the heads of my audience. So the line has always been...
The movie's point is that the process has become a joke, right? I mean, you can't believe anything you see. I personally think a lot of it's driven by changing technology. I think a couple of things have happened. Speed. Information moves so quickly that it changes the requirements of anybody who's in the information business, whether you're the President of the United States or the press secretary or a reporter covering the White House or any other beat. And the other thing that's happened is, as the cost of technology has come down, there's been an explosion in the number of media outlets. The competition is incredible. And I think that's had effect of lowering standards. So you have people responding to the news cycle, which moves so fast that you no longer have the luxury of taking a couple days and sorting out the facts. For example, when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, President Kennedy had 3 days to spend in the Oval Office, in the cabinet room, around the White House, talking to the Joint Chiefs, his other military advisors, other congressional leaders, praying, whatever he was doing, making what was an important decision as the world was on the brink of nuclear war. If that happened today, we'd have CNN flying over Cuba with live helicopter shots and people camped out on the south lawn of the White House, or actually the north lawn of the White House, demanding a response from the president. And the time that decision makers have to make decisions has been incredibly compressed. The other thing that happens is that things move so fast that impressions get embedded in people's minds really quickly. When a story breaks, boom, you have really one shot to get into that opening shot when the story gets out, or you can lose control of it forever. And I think that's what's given rise to this incredibly aggressive game of spin, where you want to get your story out, you want to get it out fast, you want to get it out right away, you don't want to get beat, you don't want somebody else to define what's happening, because once it's out, you can't bring it back. If it's wrong, tough luck. So I think that's what's given rise, and I think that we only see as time goes forward that the media is going to become more diverse, faster, and quite frankly, less accountable. I mean, the Internet's a great example. There's no accountability on the Internet. Anybody can say anything they want. Even credible news organizations put stuff up on the Internet and pull it down, and So I think all of that, the long-term effect of that is, I think it creates a very difficult environment. But it's certainly going to mean, more spin, and the whole news business becomes more like a ping pong match. Now, the good news in all that actually is I think people are a little bit skeptical. They don't believe everything they see on TV. They don't believe everything they read on the Internet. They don't believe everything they read in the newspaper, and that's pretty healthy given the reality. I mean, they're pretty smart consumers of information. I think, I think they'll become increasingly sophisticated as time goes on. So as opposed to becoming completely gullible and being able to be led around, I think they're just becoming more jaded, which is unfortunate, but they're not sheep. They're going to go off the edge of the cliff. And anybody who thinks they are is going to lose the game, because they're smarter than that.
And I'll do the same in his great name.
We only have certain visual images of the Gulf War. It's almost like a shared, collective. You say, well, my God, how come we don't have... That was it. That's all we got from it. It was incredibly controlled, and you could have faked any one of those pieces very easily. The way they show, the building and whatever. You could fake all of that, and that, in a sense, was one of the things when David, Mam, and I were discussing this project, is how much you can fake. And by the time, if you find out it's true, it doesn't matter. We're onto something else. So the possibilities of faking images for whatever purpose is certainly possible. Will it happen? To what extent will it happen? That's the basis of WAG.
Good old shoe, good old shoe, stand up straight and proud the way he taught you to, and you might even get to heaven with a soul like that good old shoe.
Television has changed a lot in American politics, but you know what? Television's reality.